ये 206 है ना? ओके, so we'll start with the GS2. So if you see in the GS2 also, with respect to the weightage of the questions or the subjects, like from polity, every year you get around 8 to 9 questions. Okay? Then from the IR section, every year you get 4 questions for 50 marks, even the question numbers. Okay? So question number 9, 10, 19 and 20. Okay? These 4 questions are always from the IR, and the remaining around 7 to 8 questions are from the governance and social justice. Okay? So this year you had only 2 questions from the social justice, and the remaining you had 9 questions from the polity, 4th, and from governance you had 5 questions. Okay. One interesting thing that you need to know with respect to the polity, governance and social justice is that the micro themes have remained the same. Okay. Micro themes as in the important micro themes, which are, for example, if you take the polity, the important micro themes will include your elections, judiciary, local bodies, then philosophy of the constitution. From governance, it is role of civil society organizations, e-governance, civil services, right? And from social justice, it is either related to the social sector indicators like health, education, or with respect to poverty. Okay? So the themes, these are the core micro themes from which you generally get the maximum amount of the questions. Now what has happened, or the recent trend with these micro themes, is that rather than simply asking the static questions, what UPSC is doing in these themes is they are linking the static with applied or current affairs. Okay, for example, if you see the very first question, the first part of the question, okay, is a static one. Jaise corrupt practices under the Representation of People Act. So this is static. If you see our X factor also, you will find the list of the corrupt practices given under section 123 of the Representation of People Act, and these current corrupt practices leads to the disqualification under section 8 of the RPA 1951, right? So this is the static part. But second part of it, that is whether the disproportionate increase in the assets, whether it is considered as undue influence and a corrupt practice. This is the current affairs related part where you need to know the Supreme Court judgment in the Jan Prahari case. Right. The similar question also, if you see, this second question also, the significance of the tribunals. Again, this is from the static, right? But second part of the question is recent tribunal reforms, right, made through the Tribunal Amendment Act 1921. This is the current linkage. Then this is with respect to the constitutional morality. So explain the concept of constitutional morality. This is the static part from the philosophy of the constitution. So in the X factor, the very first chapter is with respect to the philosophy of the constitution only, and in that you will also find the concept of constitutional morality, right? But the second part of it, how it ensures the balance between judicial accountability and independence. So this is the applied part, right? So the point is कि it's not just limited to the static, okay, but you also need to cover the applied part, which will come only with the practice. Okay. And second thing, you need to be well versed with the current affairs. Okay. Now coming to the questions of polity. Okay. So the first question is, discuss the corrupt practices for the purpose of the Representation of the People Act. Analyze. So this is the first part of the question. And this is the second. Analyze whether the increase in the assets of the legislator and their associate disproportionate to their known source of income would constitute undue influence and a corrupt practice. Okay, here this doesn't matter. ठीक है, एनालाइज की जगह पे इवन इफ दे वुड हैव गिवन एक्सप्लेन और डिस्कस और मेंशन और इलैबोरेट और कमेंट अपॉन, ठीक है, it wouldn't have matter because anyway you had to give the facts related to that particular case. And now the core theme of the question is the Representation of People Act. Again, if you see this, the disqualification of the members is the consistent micro theme on which UPSC has asked the questions frequently. Okay, before 2020 also, in 2017 also they had asked the similar kind of the question with respect to the disqualification. Before that 2015 or 2014 again they had asked with respect to disqualification. So disqualification of the members is the common micro theme. Only thing, they are asking the different grounds for the disqualification, right? Okay. So as the core theme here is the Representation of People Act. Okay, your introduction will be related to the Representation of People Act. So Representation of People Act defines a corrupt practices under section 123 of Representation of People Act, and it leads to disqualification of the candidate under section 8. So even if you give these two provisions, that will be a decent factual introduction. Okay. Then corrupt practices, you just need to give the brief list of the corrupt practices, but along with it, do not simply mention the corrupt practices. If possible, try to give one of the examples. ठीक है, कि जैसे bribery, offering the gratification, money, jobs, gifts, entertainment, ठीक है, to induce or to induce a candidature, withdrawal of the candidature, or influence the voting. Okay, the example of it, distribution of cash or liquor. Similarly, undue influence, the example of it, threats of boycott or misuse of official authority. Okay. Then appeal on the identity grounds. Identity grounds are religion, race, caste, okay, or gender, etc. Then promotion of enmity, the spreading of hatred, example, hate speech. Okay. Then false statement, which aims to harm the personal character or the personal character of the opposition candidate, right? So these are the corrupt practices given under the section 123. Apart from it, Supreme Court has also held that providing false information about electoral candidates qualification, right, is not a corrupt practice. Then the excessive expenditure, misuse of official machinery, booth capturing, glorification of sati or regressive practices. All these are the list of the corrupt practices, and these are given under the section 123 of the Representation of People Act. This is factual one. Then assets of the legislature and question of undue influence. The second part of the question. Okay. Increase in the assets of the legislator would constitute undue influence and consequently a corrupt practice. Okay. So here you have to mention the Supreme Court judgment. Okay. One. So here also all you need to do is to mention the fact. Since 2004, the members or the candidates have to declare their assets and the liabilities. Okay. Secondly, the elected members have to disclose their assets to the speaker or the chairman of the Rajya Sabha. Then Supreme Court in the Lok Prahari case has mandated that the candidates must disclose not just their assets but source of income. Okay. So if they mention the assets plus source of income, both have to be mentioned. Okay. And then Supreme Court has also held that non-disclosure of assets or income of sources amount to corrupt practices. Okay. This. So non-disclosure is a corrupt practice, but what they have asked in the question is whether assets, increase in assets disproportionate to their known sources. Okay, so if they have mentioned, one thing is if they fail to mention their income or the source of income. So failure to disclose it, there are two angles to it. One, failure to disclose any one of it. Okay. This amount to corrupt practice. Okay. But even if they disclose and if there is a mismatch between increase in assets and the source of income, so in case of the mismatch, okay, that is not a corrupt practice per se, but that is punishable under the other acts like Prevention of Corruption Act. Okay. And if there is a mismatch and if the case is proven under Prevention of Corruption Act and if the candidate is convicted for more than 2 years, in that case he will be disqualified immediately for the period of his conviction plus 6 years after the conviction, right? So in Lok Prahari case, what Supreme Court has held? In case of non-disclosure of assets, okay, non-disclosure is the corrupt practice under section 123. Okay, but increase in assets, so even if they declare, and increase in asset disproportionate to known income is also a matter of corruption under Prevention of Corruption Act, okay, or Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Okay, and after the conviction under these two acts, so if he is convicted for the period of more than 2 years, he will automatically be disqualified for his conviction period plus 6 years from his release. Okay, in the case of Lalu Prasad Yadav, you can take. Okay, so he was convicted under Prevention of Corruption Act. He got disqualified for his period of conviction plus 6 years after the release. Right, so this is the status. So you need to understand the difference between disclosure of the assets, sorry, non-disclosure of the asset and disproportionate rise in the income. Both are the different concepts. Okay, that, and as this particular theme is related to the elections, so one common conclusion that we suggest in the election is, there is one quote: electoral reforms is the mother of all reforms. Okay, one common that we provide is the electoral reforms is mother of all reforms. You can use this one quote, or the Supreme Court has also emphasized that the informed electorate is the foundation of democracy. So strengthening asset disclosure, probing unexamined wealth, unexplained wealth, and empowering the election commission are essential to protect the fairness of India's elections. So basically what you are doing is, you are giving the way forward. Right, strengthening asset disclosure, probing the or timely probing of the unexplained wealth, and strengthening the powers of the election commission are essential to ensure the freeness. Okay, this. Then coming to the second question, comment on the need of administrative tribunals as compared to the court system. So the first part of the question is need of administrative tribunals, and second, assess the impact of recent reforms through rationalization of tribunals made in 2021. So if you see in this particular question, they have asked total 3 demands. Okay, so it is a 10 marker question, but there are 3 demands, and fourth one is the implicit one. This is your first demand, right? Second, assess the impact of the recent tribunal reforms. So here first you have to mention recent tribunal reforms, and second you have to do its assessment, that is its positive impact, its limitations, and as you are giving the limitations or the challenges or the negative aspects of it, way forward becomes your implicit demand. Right, so even for the 10 marker question, there are total 4 demands in this particular question. Right, so here what we will do is, we will start with, or we will introduce our answer with the constitutional provision. It is a standard way. 42nd constitutional amendment inserted Article 323A, 323B, enabling the establishment of administrative tribunals. Right? If you want, after this you can use a flowchart also and give the specific provisions of 323A, which provides for the administrative tribunals, the central administrative tribunal and state administrative tribunals, and 323B, which gives for the tribunals for the other matters. Right, you can give this classification also. Yes, you can attach it with the introduction. I haven't given in this one because already there are 4 demands in the question, right? So we have to manage our space. So we have to keep our introduction also as minimum as or as brief as possible, right? So need for administrative tribunals, right? So administrative, why there is a need for administrative tribunals compared to the court system. Basically, you have to provide the comparative analysis of the tribunals and the courts, right? So आपके जो statements होंगे elaboration के, that will be related to the comparison between the two, right? So what will be the comparison points? जैसे basically the idea behind the tribunals is speed, specialization, and flexibility. ठीक है, as tribunals deal with the specific matters, ठीक है, they have the specialized judges. That brings the specialization into the justice. Okay. Second, they are not or they follow the principles of natural justice. Okay. They are not bound by the normal court's procedures. So that provides them the flexibility, and this flexibility also ensures the speed. Right? These are the 3 core principles of the tribunals. Right? So why there is a need of tribunals? You will generate the points based upon these only. So first, specialized expertise. So why specialization? Because they deal with the technical issues in areas like, you can add any area: taxation, environment, telecom, competition, service matters, etc. Right? An example you can add NGT. Then speedy justice. So because they are not bound by the court procedures or they follow the principle of natural justice, right? Because of that, they lead to the speedy justice. Third, again, they reducing the burden on the courts. Here in elaboration, you can give the data. Okay? So tribunals is the caseload of the high courts and the Supreme Court, or you can give the data also. In high court, overall, there are more than 5 crore cases pending in judiciary, right? So that data also you can give. Then cost effective and accessible, again quasi-judicial role and consistency and uniformity because of the specialization, right? That ensures the consistency and uniformity in judgments. Yeah, you can also in elaboration you can also mention this leads to predictability and ease of doing business. ठीक है, example you can give security appellate tribunal. ठीक है, ठीक है. So this is the need, and then you come to the recent reforms. So Tribunal Reforms Act, the first, you have to give the provisions of it. So the provisions with respect to the abolition or merger of the tribunals. So this first is lead to the rationalization, right? So rationalization. Second, there is a changes with respect to the appointment and tenure. Right? Tenure was fixed at 4 years, and the age was limited to the 50 years. Okay, that, and some of the powers of the tribunals were shifted to the high courts. So these were the provisions. Then you have to talk about the positives and negatives of it. Okay, if you have the good content with respect to this topic, what you can do this, when you are going for the assessment, you can use a tabular format, right? So positives as in, so you just focus upon the provisions. So based upon the provisions itself, you can generate the positives. Just for example, this has merger of tribunals, right? And these transferred functions to the of to the high courts. Okay, so because of the merger, it will lead to rationalization. Okay, so because of rationalization, it will lead to reduction in the cost. Second, rationalization will also lead to the reduction in the overlapping jurisdiction, right? There won't be two tribunals dealing with the same issues, right? Then second, as the powers have transferred to the high courts, right? That means it will strengthen judicial oversight. Right. So provision से ही you have to derive its positives and negative. 2 points यहाँ पे आ गए. Second, appointment and tenure. So tenure is fixed at 4 years and maximum age of 50 and 67. Right. So that will ensure. So they have given the clear criteria. So this clarity with respect to criteria for appointment and qualifications. Right. This will be your third point. Right. Then again you can bring in the efficiency. So जो provisions है, on the basis of that itself you have to derive the positives and negatives of it. Right. Similarly again concerns में भी देखोगे. So as the powers have been transferred to the high courts, as the powers have been transferred to the high courts, it will lead to increased burden on the high courts. Right, already there are 60 lakh plus cases pending in the high courts. Okay. Second, the purpose of the tribunals is specialization of justice. But as the powers are transferred with the high courts, this will loss of specialized expertise. Right, because high courts have the generic judges, unlike the tribunals which have the specialized appellate or the specialized judges. Right. Third, again आपका accessibility का issue आएगा. Right. Then dilution of the objective, that is the objective of specialization and speedy justice under 42nd Amendment Act is diluted. So on the basis of the provisions only you have to derive the points, right? And after that you simply give the way forwards. Way forwards as in you have already transferred the powers to the high court. So now what needs to be done is they strengthen the capacity of the high courts by providing technical benches, right? Expert advisors and digital case management. Right. Second, you enhance the accessibility for the citizens by establishing the regional benches. Right. Example, you can give recently the regional bench of the or divisional bench of the Maharashtra or the Mumbai High Court was established in Kolhapur. Right. You can give that kind of the example. No. Then even two-way forwards are sufficient for this. No? Then harmonization of laws or periodic review of the tribunal performance. These also you can give. Okay. In conclusion, again, thus there is need for again थोड़ा सा futuristic to ensure accessibility, credibility, and effectiveness of the tribunals. In that way, you can give a single line of the conclusion. ठीक है, थोड़ा way forward type, you can give the conclusion. Yeah. Again, always remember that whenever they are asking you the assessment of similar, it is not limited to the Tribunal Reforms Act. Okay. They will ask you the assessment of the any government scheme. Right? There are many questions. They will ask you assess the performance of the schemes for the women empowerment. Okay. Or they can ask you the specific scheme. Assess the performance of they can ask Manrega. Okay, so you just need to know the provisions. Okay, once you know the provisions, you can derive the positives and the negatives of it. Okay. That now compare and contrast the president's power to pardon in India and the US. Are there any limits to both in both countries? What are the preemptive pardons? So if you see, I was able to predict the same question in our FND. Right? We asked the question on the same theme, pardoning powers of the president of the India and the US. Right? We are able to predict this particular question because there was a controversy because of the Joe Biden pardoning his son. Right? There was a huge controversy in the US. So we were expecting the question on this theme and we got it correct. After the paper, I got call from at least 15 to 16 students with respect to this particular question. Because I think we were only we asked this particular question. Okay. Again, in the introduction, you just provide the definition. Okay. Or you can give the recent contextual introduction also. Recently, the pardoning power of the president were in controversy in context of the US President Joe Biden pardoning his son. Okay, you can give the contextual introduction also, or you can give the origin of it. The origin originated from the royal prerogative of mercy of the British monarch. Okay, the origin of the pardoning power can be traced from the royal prerogative of mercy of British monarch. Okay, that.
This was one of the primary reasons why he lost in university.
Not one of the primary reason. It was, see, there is a tradition in the US. Before remitting the office, every president pardons few of his colleagues, or every president pardons himself also. Okay, this was not the first time. Then remember this, whenever they ask you to compare and contrast, okay, what mistake many of the aspirants do is they simply provide the differences between it. Right? But comparison involves differences plus similarities. Okay, the similarities part many of you miss. So always remember, every year you get a question on the comparison of the one aspect of the Indian Constitution with another constitution. Always remember key whenever they ask you to compare, or even if they specifically ask you to differentiate between the judicial review in India and the US, then also apart from the differences, you also have to show bit of similarities. Okay. So here, these are the differences. So constitutional basis, articles, scope of power, okay. Then death penalty, court martial, advisory role, exercises power on the advice of Council of Minister. It is discretionary, and judicial interpretation. In India, it is subject to judicial review on the basis of mala fide intentions, whereas in US, it is not subject to judicial review. However, there are few similarities. So what are the similarities? One is the nature of the power. So both, so you know, even in India, the pardoning power is the executive power. It's not a judicial power, or it's not a legislative power, right? In US also, it is legislative power. Sorry, executive power, right? So in both the countries, it is executive power, right? Second, the objective of both is same, that is to correct judicial error. Third, both are explicitly provided under the constitution, right? Yes, sir. Then both can provide all sorts of pardon, reprieve, respite, remission, commutation, and then both can commute the death sentence. पांच नहीं है तो भी, even if you give at least these three, this will be more than sufficient. ठीक है? Then second part of the question, कि are there any limits in both countries? ठीक है? This we have already covered in this. In India, it is subject to judicial review. Second, in US, the limits is it is not applicable to the state laws. Right. So this we have already covered. No need to give the write it separately. But the third part of the question, what is preemptive pardons? This you have to address separately. So preemptive pardons, you give the heading, provide the definition. So pardon granted before the conviction, right? So it is allowed in US. So the pardon which Joe Biden granted, it was before the conviction. Okay, but in India, the pardon happens only after the conviction. Okay, this. So after that, you can prepare the second point also. Pardon granted before conviction or even before formal charges are filed. It is provided in US but not in India. Okay, you give the one example. Now coming to the conclusion, as this, now you know the context why this question was asked, because of the controversy was there, right? So whenever there is a controversy associated with any of the theme, automatically way forward thoda sa you need to give a futuristic or the way forward type, right? So what way forward will you give? While the power to pardon is vital safety valve of justice, yeah, or in simple words also, कि though pardoning power is essential to uphold the principle of justice, okay, it needs to be exercised with caution, transparency, and restraint. Right? There has to be transparency, there has to be a caution, right? It cannot be used arbitrarily, and there has to be the restraint and transparency. So thoda way forward type, and even if you double highlight it, that will ensure its visibility. This can give you the extra 0.5 mark. Okay. Okay. Then discuss the nature of Jammu Kashmir Legislative Assembly after Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act. Briefly describe the powers and functions of Assembly of the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. So nature of Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly. Describe the powers and functions. Okay. This is again a completely static subject. Okay. Again on the same theme they had, I don't know why they are asking on this particular question again and again, but again I think it was in news also. Okay, because the Jammu Kashmir election happened after 40 years. Okay. Secondly, there was a comment by the Home Minister Amit Shah also that the statehood to the Kashmir will be granted soon. Right. So with respect to the statehood, and it was in news because of the elections also. Okay. So abrogation of Article 370 marked the historic shift from Jammu and Kashmir from earlier position of special status. Here you can mention the Article 370 already mentioned special status with own constitution and assembly to union territory. Okay. This is the contextual or the static introduction you can give, or you can simply give the Article 370 was abrogated in 2019, leading to the this losing of statehood of Jammu and Kashmir, and or it after the abrogation of Article 370, the three new union territories of Jammu, Kashmir, and Ladakh were created. Okay. Also, there was a demand for the sixth schedule also from Ladakh. That was also in the news. No? So, nature of Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly. So, first key Reorganization Act. It created two union territories. So, Jammu and Kashmir with legislature, Ladakh without legislature. Okay. Then the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly resembles that of Delhi and Puducherry, functional under Article 239A, which is applicable to union territories. Then it has lieutenant governor like Delhi, he appointed by the president and will greater authority than governors of the state. Okay. Then time period, 5-year time period, not 6 as earlier. And this is the structure of the assembly. Okay, even if you don't know this part, this is completely fine. Even if you don't know this part, this is completely fine, but at least these first 4 points you should know. Okay. Then this is again static, updated Lakshmikant may be diya hai. Then powers and functions. Again, powers and functions, what you will be doing? Simply classify it under the legislative powers, law-making powers. So can legislate on subjects of the state list, concurrent list, except public order, police, land, and laws require assent of the lieutenant governor, who can reserve the bill for the president, same as governor. Then executive oversight, council of minister is responsible to the assembly. Financial powers, passing of the budget, money bills. Then limitations, 3 limitations are there, right? And then conclusion, again you conclude with the nature. It is a restricted legislature balancing democratic representation with, you can union direct control, that is also fine, democratic representation with national security imperative. This also you can give. Okay. This is also fine. Again, it was a static. Next, Attorney General. Again, this was straight from the PYQ. In 2019 itself, they had asked the attorney. The demand of the question is also same. Forget about anything. Basically, what they had asked is the responsibilities, rights, limitations. That's it. ठीक है, आपके 3 सब हेडिंग बनेंगे, उसके नीचे पॉइंट्स. The structure will also similar. You talk about the article in the introduction. So Article 76 provides for the Attorney General of India, who is the highest law officer of the country. Okay. Then responsibilities, legal advisor, representation of the government in the courts. You can give any of the example. Okay. Almost in everyday news, you read about the Attorney General or at present Solicitor General mostly. Okay. So these are the functions or responsibilities. Then rights. So he can participate in the proceedings of the house. Okay. Then he has the right to audience in any court in the, India. Okay. And also enjoys the privileges of the members. Limitations. He is not a government servant. Second limitation is lack of security of tenure. Third, he doesn't have right to vote. Okay. That's it. You just conclude. Okay. Now, constitutional morality is the fulcrum which acts as an essential check upon high functionaries and citizens alike. So this is the first part of the question. Okay. How constitutional morality acts as a check on high functionaries and citizens. Who are the high functionaries? Yes. High functionaries will involve your three organs of the state: legislature, executive, judiciary, and the fourth one is the administration. Okay. And citizens alike, in view of the above observation, explain the concept of constitutional morality. Okay. And its application to ensure balance between judicial independence and accountability. Now, I was expecting a question on the balance between judicial independence and accountability. In our FLT, we asked it, but we linked it with the impeachment process because impeachment process was in news, right? Justice Verma. But rather than impeachment, they asked on the appointment, which was not at all in the news. But ठीक है, we asked on the theme, this thing, how it balanced judicial accountability and independence. So at least our student had the idea about how to approach the second part of the question. Now, as the question is on the concept of constitutional morality, introduction will be the definition. So as per B.R. Ambedkar, constitutional morality implies adherence not merely to the letter of the constitution, but its spirit, values and principles. ठीक है, यहीं पे you can stop. This is your introduction. Then you come to the second part, first demand of the question, constitutional morality as a fulcrum. So checks on the highest functionaries. Okay, here what you can do, you can make high functionaries also as your subheading, right? You can make like this, check on executive, check on judiciary, check on legislature. That is also the one way. Or the second way, you can highlight the major principles of the constitutional morality and link it with the higher constitutional authorities. No, so checks on the functionaries, supremacy of the constitution, which is one of the principle of the constitutional morality, right? So supremacy of the constitution limits arbitrary use of executive or legislative power, which is your high functionary, right? So you can elaborate here. If you want, you can use the example also. Okay. So example, key arbitrary is this key NJAC judgment. Okay. That. Then rule of law ensures decisions are legal and not personal or political, again related to executive. Then judicial review. Judicial review is also part of the constitutional morality because judiciary is the guardian of the constitution, right? Then equality and non-discrimination. So prevents rulers or the government from favoring particular groups. Democratic accountability, separation of power and spirit of justice. Okay, these are all the principles of the constitutional morality. Then checks on citizens, the fundamental duties, tolerance and fraternity, constitutional patriotism, now promotes loyalty to constitutional ideas over narrow identity politics. Okay? Then constitutional morality balance. Now, as you have elaborated upon this part, ठीक है, automatically ये जो part है explain the concept. This has also been addressed. Okay, explain में basically क्या करते हैं हम? We give the definition and give its core features, right? So we have given the definition and core features of it. We have used it into the, or we have used it as the subheadings, right? Then balancing judicial independence and accountability. Okay? Then how it balance? It protects. Now what you have to do is you have to give the points from both sides. Judicial accountability also, judicial independence also. Right. So first it protects autonomy. Example NJC case. Struck down NJC to preserve independence. Second, it guides ethical conduct. ठीक है. So Sabrimala judgment upheld equality and dignity over social morality, or give primacy to constitutional morality over social morality. ठीक है. Third, ensures transparency and accountability. So this is related to judicial accountability. So example, Subhash Agrawal case, where the Chief Justice of India was brought, or Office of Chief Justice of India was brought under the RTI, right? Then same checks arbitrary powers. Right? Example, Veeraswamy case, where the probe of the judges was allowed with Chief Justice of India's approval. Then uphold rights and justice. Example, Navtej Singh Johar. Balances extreme. Keshwanand Bharti, it allowed Parliament to amend the or it allowed the Parliament to amend the Constitution, but within the restrictions of the basic structure, or within the limits of the basic structure. And balancing judicial dignity with free speech. Basically, this is related to the, or it prevents judicial high-headedness. Right? This is basically with respect to the contempt of court powers. Now, if you see, what we have basically done is, जो question के keywords है, judicial independence, accountability, balance, उसी से हमने 3 points generate किए, autonomy, accountability, balance. ठीक है. So ensuring accountability, ensuring autonomy, then balancing the extremes. So there are two extremes, no? One is independence, complete independence. Second is complete accountability or subordination of the judiciary. So what data is asking कि balance. So balance से ही 2 points हमने generate किए. Right. So this is how, because ये theme आपको कोई भी book में नहीं मिलेगा कि how constitutional morality balances accountability and independence. Right. This is how you have to generate the points in a smarter way. ठीक है. And then you conclude. Thus, constitutional morality acts as a fulcrum, avoiding two extremes, that is, judicial supremacy and judicial subordination. Right? As Dr. Ambedkar noted, constitutional morality must be cultivated to sustain democracy. Unka quote hai, you can provide the quote of the Ambedkar also. And if you want more innovation, what you can do is you can draw the diagram also. Okay, this is independence, this is accountability, and the balance is maintained by constitutional morality. ठीक है. या फिर आपका जो बैलेंस वाला डायग्राम रहता था, ठीक है, अकाउंटेबिलिटी, इंडिपेंडेंस, दिस कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोरालिटी. ठीक है. दोनों में से कोई भी एक डायग्राम ऑल्सो, इवन इफ यू वुड हैव ड्रॉन, दैट वुड हैव ऑल्सो फेच्ड यू 0.25 or 0.5 marks. ठीक है. सो दिस इज हाउ यू हैव टू डील विद द रैंडम क्वेश्चंस. Now, ये theme you will never read in any of the books. Okay. Now, again, this is a recurring theme. He has conferred amending power on the ordinary legislative institutions with few procedural hurdles. In view of this statement, examine procedural and substantive limitations on the amending powers of the parliament to change the constitution. Okay. So procedural and substantive limitations and uska examination you have to do. Okay. Again, this similar question was already asked. If you would have done PYQs thoroughly, it is not a absolute power but a limited power. They have already asked. Okay. So again, you will start with the article. The Constitution under Article 368 confer amending power to the Parliament. However, this is not unlimited. There are procedural limitations provided in the Constitution itself and substantive limitations provided by or provided through the constitutional interpretations of the Supreme Court. Right. So this is how you will provide the article also, and you will link the introduction with the theme of the question also. Okay. And then briefly using a flowchart, you highlight the amending powers. So under Article 368, outside 368, right? Under 368, you have special majority. Second type is special majority with consent of half of the states. And outside 368, it is simple majority. Okay, if you want, you can give one examples also. Each. Then procedural limitations. So what are the procedural limitations? Yes, one is the special majority. Second, the federal provisions can only be amended with consent of half of the states. Third, requirement of the consent of the president. Fourth, no provision for the joint sitting. Fifth, subject to judicial review. Example एक दे दो कि how judicially invalidated the provisions of this 24th Amendment Act or recent this NJAC Act 99th Constitutional Amendment Act. Right? You can give those examples also. So special majority requirement, ratification by half of the states for federal provisions, mandatory presidential assent, no joint sitting, or initiation in the parliament only, not in the state legislature. Then no amendment by ordinance or referendum. No, substantive is the Supreme Court judgments where first, obviously the basic structure, doctrine. Second, in Minroa Mills, Supreme Court held that limited amending power itself is the part of basic structure. Right. Third, in IR Coelho case, Supreme Court held that the amendments put in Schedule 9 of the Constitution, they will also be subject to judicial review if they are infringing upon the fundamental rights of the citizens. So, आपके 3 judgments आ गए, that is sufficient. Okay. That. Now, okay. So what they have examined the procedural and substantive limitations. After that, you have to give the examination of it. Okay. Briefly, you can use a table. So examination of this, the limitations, and simply you can use a table. Okay. On the significance of it and challenges. So what are the significance? Yes, one, checks the legislative overreach, right? This example, the 42nd Amendment Act. ठीक है. Second, yes, what else you can write? First is it prevents legislative overreach. Second, blend of rigidity and flexibility, right? Third, what else? Ensures or protects federal principles. That here challenges में what कि majority of the provisions can be amended by simple majority, right? Second, कि frequent amendments, total 106 amendments, right? Third, कि judicial overreach, यही 3 पॉइंट्स उसके लिमिटेशंस आएंगे. जो सब्सटैंटिव लिमिटेशंस है उसका चैलेंजेस जुडिशियल ओवररीच. So this examination briefly you give, then you can give the conclusion. ठीक है. Again, कि one quote of the Grenville Austin, who held that Indian Constitution is the seamless web of principles, where neither rigidity or flexibility dominates. Thus, amendment power reflect the delicate balance. No? So again, you can use the same diagram. ठीक है. अगर ऊपर वाले में सर्कुलर डायग्राम यूज किया है तो यहाँ you can use the balancing diagram. In this way, the flexibility, rigidity, this is amendment procedure. ठीक है. Okay. Then evolution of the collegium system, critically examine the advantages, disadvantages of the judges of the Supreme Court of India and that of US. क्या आइडियली पता नहीं ये क्यों पूछा है उन्होंने क्वेश्चन. दिस पार्ट शुडंट हैव बीन देयर इनटू द आंसर बिकॉज इसकी वजह से क्वेश्चन के बहुत ज़्यादा डिमांड्स हो गए. ठीक है. सो इफ यू सी, वन इज द इवोल्यूशन, दिस इज योर फर्स्ट डिमांड. सेकंड, advantages and disadvantages of appointment of judges of India, this is your second. Third demand with respect to India, and then with respect to the US. So this is fourth, fifth demand. So there are 5 demands in the question. ठीक है. So ये पता नहीं उन्होंने क्यों दिया है, it shouldn't have been there. But ठीक है. So again, if you see introduction, same principle with the article of the Constitution. Article 124 and 217 provides for the appointment of the judges of the Supreme Court and High Courts. They are appointed by President after the consultation with Chief Justice of India. Okay. Then evolution, again 4 judges cases दे दो. First judge case, second judge case, third judge case, fourth judge case which is NJSC. No. Then to talk about the advantages of it. Okay, advantages: judicial independence, checks upon executive power or protects the separation of power. Okay. Then protection of basic structure, वही points आएंगे. Disadvantages: opacity, lack of accountability, nepotism, जिसमें law commission has flagged the uncle judge syndrome, where the majority of the new appointees were the relatives of the exist collegium members. ठीक है. जैसे अभी recently I think nephew or some relative of the Chief Justice of India was appointed as the judge in the High Court. ठीक है. Then democratic deficit, inconsistency, there is no clear criteria, resistance to reform, etc. ठीक है. Then advantages of the US system. So in US system is basically where the president appoints the judges. Yeah, where the nominations were scrutinized by the Senate. So it is a mechanism which balances the executive and legislative, or there is a balance of power between executive and legislature, okay, with respect to appointment. Second thing is that they have the lifetime tenure. Once appointed as a judge in the US courts, their tenure continues till their death. Okay. So advantages, one is the democratic legitimacy. President nominates, Senate confirms, dual democratic accountability. Okay. Transparency, the Senate Judicial Committee conducts public hearings. So again इंडिया में separation of power होता है, ठीक है, but वहाँ पे as it is appointed by the executive and legislature, so it is checks and balance system, ठीक है. बाकी the merit predictability. Disadvantages again politicization, ठीक है, or you can talk about goes against principle of separation of power, no, because it is appointed by executive. Second, it can lead to the politicization, or there is a word for it with respect to the US, it is spoils system. Okay. Second, it needs consensus between the president and the Senate. So that can lead to the delay in the appointments. As it happened in 2022. Okay. And erosion of judicial neutrality. And again, with respect to judiciary, one common quote we suggested during this smash also, there is one quote of Lord Bryce. If lamp of justice goes out in darkness, you cannot measure the amount of, or if the lamp of justice vanishes, you cannot measure the amount of darkness. ठीक है, तो ये कोड दे दो एंड उसके आगे वन कनेक्टिंग स्टेटमेंट ऑफ द वे फॉरवर्ड यू कैन गिव. इट रिक्वायर्स ट्रांसपेरेंसी, impartiality, fairness in appointment. ठीक है, अब क्वेश्चन में ऑलरेडी 5 डिमांड्स है इसलिए आई हैवंट गिवन वे फॉरवर्ड. ठीक है, आइडियली देयर शुड हैव बीन अ वे फॉरवर्ड because you are highlighting the disadvantage of the collegium system, but question में ही 5 डिमांड्स है. ठीक है,
4 डिमांड है, 3 पेजेस है, तो सर 1 पेज में 2 डिमांड को एड्रेस करेंगे.
जिस डिमांड के लिए जितना कंटेंट है उस अकॉर्डिंगली. Or you can use the table also for advantages, disadvantages. And at the end, while giving the way forward, you can mention the UK system, which is the transparent system of appointment of the judges. Okay. Now, last question with respect to the, or last question from Polity, it is evolving pattern of the center state. This is related to the federalism. Again, the core micro theme. In this question also we were expecting, actually I asked the question on the same theme last year also and this year also, because within federalism the major issue that has emerged is the fiscal federalism, right? This opposition rule state and the BJP divide, or the north versus south divide, okay, in India's federalism. So in that context it was an important theme. So how far has India's federal structure ensured political and fiscal equity? Yeah, so basically it was the same demand. They have asked evolving pattern of center state financial relation in context of planned development in India. How far recent reforms? So basically they have first asked the evolution and how far. How far matlab positives, negatives. Recent reforms impacted fiscal federalism in India. Right. So there are again 4 demands, or you can say you can divide it into the 3 demands also. First, you highlight the evolution overall from independence to present, right? Because they have asked in context of planned development. So planned development was since independence. If they would have asked in context of LPG reforms or in context of ease of doing business. So you would have given the this evolution from LPG reforms. No, but यहाँ पे plan development बोला है तो you have to highlight from the independence itself. ठीक है? So evolution, then how far recent reforms, so positives and negatives. That is the demand of the question. ठीक है? So इसमें भी again you can start with the introduction, the articles. Financial relations are dealt by Article 268 to 293 and evolved alongside planned development, moving from central dominance to cooperative federalism. So basically you have linked it with the theme of the question also, right? And then you highlight the evolution, where yesterday also I explained how you have to divide it into the phases, right? So this was the first phase of 1950s to 60s, centralized planning, no 5-year plans, major discretionary grants, and center was states were dependent upon the central grants. In 1969 there was a Gadgil formula, which introduced a criteria for the devolution of the funds to the states. And this criteria included population, income, then the governance efforts, etc. Then 70s and 80s rise in non-plan expenditure. In post-liberalization phase, 1919 onwards, so greater autonomy to the states. So 13th Finance Commission increased the share of the state to 32%. 14th Finance Commission increased it to the 42%, right? And after the abrogation of 370, Jammu Kashmir lost statehood, so 42 became 41%, right? So post liberalization, this led to the greater state autonomy, because post liberalization also coincided with coalition governments. Because of the coalition governments, there was a greater role of the regional parties. So the autonomy of the states increased, right? Then abolition of the planning commission, finance commission 14th, 15th. Okay. This is the evolution. Then 2017 GST reforms. And then you directly highlight positive impacts, because you have mentioned the recent reforms also. Right, you have mentioned GST, Finance Commission and all. So do you directly come to the positive impacts? So नीति आयोग का impact क्या हो गया कि shift from top down transfers of the planning commission to cooperative and competitive federalism, right? Then role of finance commission increased because it increased the devolution of the funds. Third, GST council, where 2/3 of the vote share was with the states, so it was also a reflection of cooperative federalism, right? Then during COVID, states were provided with greater flexibility or greater powers with respect to borrowing, right? So under article 293, these states can borrow only with the consent of the center, right? So the center increased the borrowing limit up to 5%. Now negative impacts. So with negative impacts, the major negative impact is even though the finance commission has increased the share of the states to 42% or 41%, the what center has done is to mitigate the loss of the revenue, center has resorted to the cess and surcharge, right? Because cess and surcharge is not part of the divisible pool of resources which has to be shared with states, right? So rise of cess and surcharge, okay, which is not shared with states. Again, this is the data. अब ये हमने मॉडल आंसर में भी दिया था, ठीक है. सेकंड, रिड्यूस डिवॉल्यूशन, इट वाज 41%, ठीक है. देन जीएसटी लिंक फिस्कल स्ट्रेस, the delay in the GST compensation, right? Then use of 2011 census in devolution, this has created north-south divide, right? Then centrally sponsored schemes continue to dominate transfer following the one size fits for all approach. Then borrowing constraints, borrowing restrictions under Article 293. Recently, Kerala has approached the Supreme Court also with respect to center's net borrowing limit. Then shift to conditional transfers. Again, it reduces the flexibility. Then briefly provide the way forward. GST, rationalize centrally sponsored schemes, fiscal autonomy, right, transparent grants, and one is the creating the institutional mechanism. This was one unique point which we suggested. Institutional mechanism on lines of GST Council. Okay. So there are two ways in which you can do it. One, you can establish a separate the fiscal council, okay, or you can strengthen the mandate of interstate council. Okay, so separate institutional mechanism to promote cooperative fiscal federalism. So this could have been your unique way forward. This. And then conclusion, again the same quote based conclusion which we had provided into our model answer, same you could have used. On any question related to the federalism, you can use this quote: India's unity lies not in uniformity but managing diversity through equitable federalism, right? And then, or simply that quote also is sufficient. This much conclusion is also sufficient. You just need to mug it up. कोई भी फेडरलिज्म रिलेटेड क्वेश्चन को that conclusion you can use. Okay. Now coming to the governance. Again, अगर governance के questions देखोगे तो what they are doing कि they have moved away from the static in the governance की they are no longer asking on the simple themes कि जैसे what are the benefits of e-governance or how e-governance has impacted the life of women, children or whatever, or what are the challenges with respect to e-governance. So what they are doing is they are going into the technical aspects of the e-governance. Okay. So on the similar lines, we also try to ask how e-governance has brought the behavioral and administrative shift, or how e-governance and data sharing has overcome bureaucratic silos. Okay. So we were expecting a question on this. If you see the technology and backend integration, it is also similar to the bureaucratic silos. So bureaucratic silos का point also you can add. ठीक है. And इसके जो challenges आप क्या आएंगे with respect to the limitations in the administrative shift, that will also come into this. ठीक है. So ये दोनों questions के model answer से you could have prepared this answer. ठीक है. But again, introduction, you can give of the definition of the e-governance as per World Bank. Okay, you can use the World Bank given definition of the e-governance, and for every question of the e-governance, what we had suggested is to give the fact file. Right, yesterday also in few questions we have given the fact file. Right, so here also these three, in all our e-governance question we have suggested this fact file you can give irrespective of the demand of the question, because it won't take much of the space also. Okay. Along the margins, you just have to give 2 out of these 3. ठीक है. इसमें से भी major what you can give, DBT saving 3.5 lakh crore, around 6 lakh common service centers sufficient है. Or if you want डिजीलॉकर 11.7 करोड़ यूजर्स. ठीक है, इतने तीन आर मोर देन सफिशिएंट. जस्ट अ फैक्ट फाइल. नाउ यू कम टू द कोर डिमांड कि बायस टुवर्ड्स टेक्नोलॉजी एंड बैकएंड इंटीग्रेशन. ठीक है, रादर देन यूजर सेंट्रिक डिजाइंस. सो बेसिकली व्हाट दे आर आस्किंग कि द ई गवर्नेंस प्रोग्राम्स ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट आर मेजरली टेक्नोक्रेटिक इन नेचर. ठीक है, so rather than citizen centric or participative. ठीक है, so one aspect of it is the top down approach, right? Second, technocratic means क्या होता है कि the difficult interface, right? कि जहाँ पे आपको if you go to the government website, it is very difficult to find what exactly you are looking for, right? Because of the very complex interface. वही पॉइंट्स आपके आएंगे इसमें. ठीक है, सो टेक्नोलॉजी सेंट्रिक ओरिएंटेशन. फॉर एग्जांपल कि हेवी इन्वेस्टमेंट इन आधार एंड बायोमेट्रिक सिस्टम, बट डिस्पाइट दैट देयर वर एक्सक्लूजन्स ड्यू टू द लैक ऑफ फिंगरप्रिंट ऑथेंटिकेशन ऑफ द elderlies. No, specifically there were a lot of such cases in PDS exclusion in Jharkhand. There was a case of the starvation death. It was in news last year because of the PDS exclusion. Then second, अब ये इन्होंने क्या कहा है कि बैक एंड इंटीग्रेशन. सो फोकस अपॉन बैक एंड इफिशियंसी ओवर फ्रंट एंड ईज. एग्जाम्पल MCA 21 प्रोजेक्ट, ये आपने इकोनॉमिक्स में पढ़ा होगा. It provided for automation for company filings, right? But it has a very complex interface. कोई भी दे सकते हो. You can talk about the ITR portal also. ठीक है, ITR portal provided for the online filing, but it has the complex interface and technical glitches. You can talk about the GST portal also. Then overemphasis on data collection over user-friendly service delivery. Again, top-down approach, right? Top-down approach means digital land record projects digitize records but ignore the disputes. Yes, so based upon that only you can prepare the points. अगर आप देखोगे भी तो भी जो क्वेश्चन में ही वर्ड्स दिए हैं, we have tried to rephrase those only. So technology, here technology centric or technology centric orientation. Backend integration, again focus upon the backend rather than front end is. Third, lack of user centric designs. तो मतलब टेक्नोलॉजी एंड बैकएंड इंटीग्रेशन मीन्स आपका टॉप डाउन अप्रोच है. टॉप डाउन अप्रोच, बेस्ड अपॉन दैट इटसेल्फ वी कैन क्रिएट द पॉइंट्स. ठीक है. देन निग्लेक्ट ऑफ यूजर सेंट्रिक डिजाइंस, कि उसमें सेम पॉइंट्स आपके ई गवर्नेंस के जो भी चैलेंजेस आएंगे कि डिजिटल डिवाइड, लैक ऑफ एक्सेस इन वर्नैक्युलर लैंग्वेज, राइट? कोई भी गवर्नमेंट का वेबसाइट आप दे दो. देन द प्राइवेसी एंड दिस इशू, साइबर सिक्योरिटी इशू. एग्जाम्पल आपका आधार डेटा लीक. दीज आर द कॉमन पॉइंट्स इन द ई गवर्नेंस. Same you put it into the user centric design. And then, but if you read the question, what they are asking is the to examine, right? So examine करते हुए what you give के arguments in favor, right, and arguments basically against. So you have to give the counter argument to this particular thesis also. No, e-governance are not completely technology driven or data centric. Okay, there are changes or they are user friendly also. Emerging shift towards user centric designs. कि उसमें उसी के अपोजिट पॉइंट्स आएंगे. वन इशू वी टॉक्ड अबाउट कि accessibility, lack of access in vernacular language. So yeah, multilingual and simplified interface, example Umang app. Then participatory initiatives, the Kerala state level best practice. No? Then one aspect we talked about the digital exclusion, Aadhaar or authentication issues. No, so यहाँ offline online hybrid models, example उसका आप दे सकते हो through common service centers, right? And inclusive policy frameworks, accessible India campaign mandates accessible digital platforms, which will then citizen feedback mechanisms, right? So these all ensures the user, what they have mentioned is the user centric designs. Okay, so these all measures that they have taken. So to ensure the user centrality, what you need? A simple website, that is the simple interface. Second, access in vernacular language. Third, you need a grievance readdressal mechanism, right? Where if citizens are facing any issue, you need to highlight. Fourth, you need to ensure the access to the person with disabilities, access with the rulers. So rural area, you have common service center. For physically disabled, you have accessible India campaigns. That's it. You have generated your points. Right, and way forward. Again, mainstream universal design, increase digital capabilities की जैसे, और digital capabilities की जगह you can also talk about strengthen digital literacy. And one more you can also add is global best practice, which across the Smash Mains we have suggested one global best practice for the governance, that is Estonia's e-governance model. Okay, which is the uniform model with simple interface. Okay, so even if you give two way forwards, that is also sufficient. One is again common digital literacy, second Estonia e-governance model. Okay, again same common conclusions, way forwards you can give, and there are if you want to give the conclusion more relevant to the theme of the question, you can give this one. We need to adopt a system that empowers the people rather than excludes them. Or one common conclusion which we suggested for e-governance question is quote of the PM Modi, as pointed out by PM Modi, e-governance has to be easy, effective and economic governance with simple or with user centrality. With that also you can link it with the theme of the question. Now next in the governance is, again this is a common theme, perceived as being anti-state actors rather than non-state actors. Do you agree, justify? Here also anti-state and non-state. Do you agree? So again, arguments in favor, arguments against. Okay. This was also, we predicted pluralism and diversity of India resonates in the work of NGO, which serves as vibrant forum of social change and progress, critically discuss. So basically कि NGOs का पॉजिटिव रोल बताना था, उसका नेगेटिव रोल बताना था. The theme already it has been covered. Yeah. So here introduction, you give the definition, or the what we suggested for the civil society organizations is you go for the quote based or the scholar based introduction to make it more impactful, because this has been a common theme. Every year you are getting a question on the civil society organization, pressure group or NGO, or donor agencies. No. So for such common themes, what you need is bit of uniqueness. No, so for that, what we had suggested was you give the quote of the LXD to these are the pluralist scholars according to them, or they give the lot of emphasis upon the civil society organizations, okay, as the pillars of the democracy or the bridge between the government and the citizens, right? So either you can go with the definition, okay, or he in his book Democracy in America observed that health of a democratic society may be measured by or can be measured by quality of functions performed by civil associations. ठीक है? This common code you can use for NGOs also or for civil society also. Second thing, what we had suggested was after the introduction, you give a brief input output diagram. Okay, for NGO, this I had taken from answers of AR4 Shruti Mishra. Okay, so what they do, these are the people. Okay, they have demands and needs. This was articulated by CSO. Okay. This goes as an input in political system or government, and the outcome is public policy. There is a feedback mechanism. Okay. So basically, civil society organizations are the bridge between government and people. Okay. So their functioning or importance of their role you can highlight with this diagram also after the introduction. Okay. Those who have done the Smash PYQ sessions, they already know this diagram. Or those who have read the answers of Shruti Mishra, AR4, they will know this diagram. Okay. Then next, again arguments in favor, arguments against. Perceived as anti-state actors, right? Why? Because of again their watchdog role. CSO, civil society organizations expose corruption, inefficiency, and human rights violation. So they are resisted by the government and the administration. So example, India against corruption movement. Right. Second, they resist the government policies. Right. Example, Narmada Bachao Andolan. Okay, or challenge the authority of the state. Right. Third, key protests, okay, which impacts the law and order. No. Example, anti-AFSPA protest in the Manipur, or they directly challenge the state authority. Fourth, national security implications, foreign funding suspensions. Example, cancelling of the license of the Greenpeace. Right. Fifth, key media amplification, strong criticism of policies of the government or adversarial legal action through the PILs impacting the developmental functions. Right. One again point that you can write is the report of IB, according to which civil society activism has led to the loss of 2% of GDP because of stalling of the developmental work has costed around 2% of the GDP. That is IB report. That also you can put. Right. And then you come to the counter argument. They are non-state and not anti-state. Even again, they enjoy the constitutional legitimacy. Okay, their role was recognized in under Article 19, right, Section C, which is the fundamental right to form the associations. Right. Second, you simply follow the temporal format and highlight their role in policy formulation, implementation, and feedback. Right. So in policy formulation, CSO provide the research R&D support. They provide the specialized assistance. Example, your Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Right. In policy implementation, CSOs have the reach to the even at the grassroots level or complement the administration. Okay. Second, they also provide the funding support. You can give the example of Tata Trust, Aziz Premji Trust, etc. With respect to the feedback, they play the role of interest articulation. Or play important role in the citizen or the social accountability mechanisms like social audits. Okay. So simply you can use the temporal framework and use generate the points for more specific. Democratic deepening, participation, awareness, service delivery, that is the policy implementation. Policy advocacy means policy formulation. Countervailing force act as a check on the excessive state power or global recognition. So constitutional recognition as well as global recognition. Right. And then you provide the way forward, Vijay Kumar committee recommendations and all. Okay. And then conclusion में one important keyword that we suggested was the civil society organizations or NGOs or pressure groups. They act as the important cog in the wheel of the governance. No? So cooperation between the government and the CSO is important to realize. अब कोई भी विजन जोड़ दो, विजन ऑफ न्यू इंडिया और विकसित भारत. ठीक है. But here remember, important cog in the wheels of governance. Okay. Then again, this was also a predictable question. What are environmental pressure group? Discuss their role. Then the same question we asked. Success of environmental governance depends upon state society synergy. Evaluate role of CSO in bringing gap between policy and practice in context of environmental protection in India. Same question is there. Okay. Again, pressure group, common theme across the PYQs. So introduction, you can start with the definition. So these introductions and conclusions I have taken directly from the model answers of our FLT. Okay, even the majority of the answers also. So environmental pressure groups are the subset of civil society organizations, mobilize people opinion and exert pressure on the states to promote environmental protection, conservation and sustainable development. यहाँ पे भी you can use a diagram. So as civil society organizations में we have used input output diagram, right? यहाँ पे भी you can use the organizational diagram. What you can simply do is these are people. I'll draw it here. people organize into pressure group. Okay. Then exert for policy advocacy through lobbying with government. Because of that, government results into the favorable policy. Okay. This process also you can relate. Okay. Similar we have used for the self-help group also with respect to the overall evolution. So role of environmental pressure groups, again they have already highlighted it in, they have already given you the dimensions in the question itself. So their role in awareness, influencing policies, that is policy formulation, and advocating for the environmental protection. So already they have given the dimensions in the question itself. तो आपके सब हेडिंग वही बनेंगे. So role of pressure groups, raising awareness. So awareness, what you have to do basically is the generate the points based upon the methods that they use. Right? They use the method of the social movements, the use of the strike, or they leverage the media or advertising, right? Or lobbying. Okay, so raising awareness through mass movement, youth campaign, or pollution awareness, water conservation awareness. Whatever examples you have, you can just generate the points. Then influencing policies, so जैसे through by pushing for the legislative reforms, ठीक है, or through PIL, right? कि जैसे नर्मदा बचाओ आंदोलन आपका हो गया. Then campaigns or stopping destructive projects or legislative push, and advocating through PIL or through again campaign. So on the basis of that, you can easily generate the points. Last, after that, briefly give the limitations. Limitations, ये वही limitations है which I have given in the model answer. ठीक है. So जो previous question में हमने limitations दिए थे उसमें से भी कुछ इसी में आएंगे. ठीक है. And conclusion. ठीक है कि India must move from top-down regulation to co-governance. Strengthening civic ecosystem can make environmental governance more inclusive, accountable and sustainable. Simply इतना भी अगर लिख दिया आपने, ठीक है, important cog in the wheel of governance, that is the 1 second, कि are guardians of or vital guardians of ecological conservation or ecological balance. ठीक है. So for true ecological justice, India must move from top-down regulation to co-governance. Just remember these keywords. So even if you join the this SMASH, you can around 22 basic tests are there. There are 10 advanced tests and 12 FLTs. So even if you read only those much of the model answers, I can ensure you will get 90% of the questions. Then in contemporary developmental models, decision making and problem solving are not located close to the source of information and execution, defeating objective of the development. Basically, अगर इस question का core theme, if you will see, the core theme of the question is the top-down approach. No, rather than decentralization. Right, कि contemporary, now if you focus upon the keywords, so what you have to do is contemporary developmental models. So what are the contemporary developmental models? सबसे पहले तो न्यूलिबरल मॉडल्स, जैसे आपके ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस हो गया, राइट, देन ई गवर्नेंस हो गया, ठीक है, देन डीबीटी हो गया, राइट, दीज आर योर कंटेम्प्रेरी डेवलपमेंटल मॉडल्स, नो. Then decision making and problem solving are not located close to the source of information and execution. So what is the source of information and execution? It is grassroots level, means PRI, ULB, urban local bodies, right? If decision making is not happening at that level, that means decision making is centralized. And because of this centralization, defeating the objective of development. So basically, the question is on the centralization of power, or it is implicitly related to the local bodies, right? And similar question I had also predicted in our open mock test or the smash FLT 10. India's developmental discourse in recent years. Again, if you see the wording also, contemporary developmental model. So India's developmental discourse in recent years, okay, has increasingly aligned with neoliberal economic policies, basically centralized model. Okay. Do such reforms align with constitutional vision of social justice and welfare? So defeating the objective of the development and way forward. Okay. Then the location of information and execution, which is grassroots level. Again, the issues in the functioning of Gram Sabha, right? That also we had already predicted. Now, as this is basically with respect to the development, so what we had suggested is to introduce it with the Amartya Sen concept of capability or capacity building. According to Amartya Sen, the real freedom lies in the capacity, right? So just say, according to Amartya Sen, development as freedom, true development lies in the expanding people's capabilities and participation in decision making. That is, decision making has to happen at the level of the people. That is, true development lies in democratic decision making. Okay. However, centralized decision making weakens inclusivity and accountability, defeating the objective. So that is basically the rephrasing of the question itself, the second part of the statement, right? But we have just linked it with the theory part of Amartya Sen. Then first part of the question is centralization of decision making in contemporary developmental models. It gives me points also top down design. Key example, smart cities, right? It has the top down model. Then bureaucratic hierarchy, just an example, forest clearance, or you can also talk about the red tapeism, right? Then fiscal dependence, ki jaise at the grassroots level, the PRI ULB rely on the transfers rather than on resources. So because of that, they don't have any decision making powers. They act as the administrative units of the center and state rather than the autonomous units, right? Then the planning is technocratic rather than democratic, right? Democratic planning is where there is an involvement of the people. Technocratic planning is the top down, जैसे reliance on the expert committees and consultants rather than the community knowledge, or rather than traditional knowledge. Yes. Then we command and control key, even in federalism also. You can also give the points related to the increasing number of the centrally sponsored scheme and central sector schemes. Okay. One more unique point that we suggested here was the proliferation of this one nation model. ठीक है, अगर if you see in the recent times, ठीक है, जो centralization tendency, it is reflected in proliferation of that one word, one nation one election, one nation one prime minister, वो नहीं है, one nation one ration card, ठीक है. So the proliferation of that one word itself, one nation one language, right, imposition of Hindi, one nation one ration card, one nation one election, right. So that is proliferation of that one word. Basically it aims to or the main intention of it is the uniformity, you know. So that one unique word or the point we suggested, proliferation of the one word. Okay, example, one nation one election, one nation one ration card. Okay, that also highlights the centralizing and uniformity tendencies. Okay. Then command and control federalism. क्या अभी हमने देखा कि increasing number of those the centrally sponsored and central sector schemes. ठीक है. Then weak local institutions already we have covered. Then security and strategic concerns की top down developmental models in border tribal regions. ठीक है. And digital governance bias, ये भी हमने पहले से ही, वही जो पॉइंट था आपका क्वेश्चन, more focus upon the technology and backend integration rather than the user centrality, वही इसका elaboration में you could have written the point. ठीक है. Then what they have said is, if you read the question, contemporary developmental models decision making are not located close to the source but at the central level. It has defeated objective of the development and critically evaluate. So critically evaluate means you have to give the counter argument also. But पहले we have established this part. Okay. So we have established this part, decision making as the centralized level. And now we have to explain how it defeats the objective of the development. So पहले we will explain that. Defeating the objective of the development. ठीक है, how it is defeating? Again, one size fits for all approach, reduced accountability, inclusion exclusion errors, ठीक है, then erosion of democratic decentralization, वही points अब क्या आएंगे, ठीक है, implementation gap, trust deficit, example farmer protest, and then you talk about the counter argument. ठीक है, counter argument में आपके कि जैसे it leads to uniform standards, जैसे स्वच्छ भारत मिशन और GST, right? Then national coordination, जैसे for example you require the uniformity during the national disasters, example during COVID, right? वैसे then again कि it ensures the policy coherence, right? Then economics of scale, जैसे if you implement it at the broader level, ठीक है, that builds the uniformity and ensures the economics of scale. ठीक है. And then this again efforts to ensure that decision making is close to the source of the information, right? Because you have to critically evaluate now. Decision making is not only at the central level, but it is happening also at the level of location of the information and एग्जीक्यूशन, राइट, तो उसके क्या प्रोविजंस है? 73rd 74th पैसा, state level एक आध बेस्ट प्रैक्टिस, तो state level you have the Kerala's people plan campaign. With respect to tribal you have the Forest Right Act, right? With respect to the disaster also you have state level and district level disaster management authorities. And then way forward again कि local bodies participatory planning, इसमें भी one way forward we saw yesterday. What was that way forward? With respect to participatory budgeting we discussed one yesterday. One way forward we discussed yesterday, na, with respect to participatory budgeting. What was that? We talked about, this is how you have to remember the points. The participatory budgeting, it was done in Porto, Algero or Brazil. Okay, same point you can write here. Basically, you have to talk about the participation only, no? This can ensure the participation, right? And then conclusion, again you can link it with, as it is related to the decentralization, you can link it with the Gandhi's vision and Amartya Sen's vision. Again, that can be your conclusion. Okay. Yes. Next, National Commission for Protection of Child Rights has to address challenges faced by children. This is completely factual. Okay. What measures can it taken? You can just go through the model answer. I don't think the discussion is needed. I'll just give you the structure. Has to address the challenges faced by children. So first you highlight the challenges faced. Okay. Then National Commission has to address means you highlight the functions of it. Okay. Then examine existing policies. That is, आप पॉलिसी बताओ एंड उसके लिमिटेशंस बताओ, ठीक है, एंड देन सजेस्ट मेजर्स वे फॉरवर्ड. Basically here also 1 2 3 4 5 demands are there. ठीक है. So simply introduction, National Commission for Protection of Child Rights is a statutory body जो भी है. Then key challenges briefly highlight in digital age, functions, then existing policies के examination, policy, key provisions, limitations, ठीक है, and then measures, that is way forward. ठीक है. And again conclusion, you can link it with the constitutional provision and UN Convention on Rights of Child. Okay. Then women social capital complements in advancing empowerment and gender equity. Okay, this is from social justice. Now again, what is the keyword? Is the social justice, sorry, social capital. This itself is the concept, right? And if you have done the PYQs thoroughly, you will know that the what is social capital itself has been asked in ethics 2 or 3 years back. So you need to know that concept. So introduction will be definition as defined by Robert Putnam. The social capital is the network, norms and trust that enables collective action in society. Okay? So women social capital is built through self-help groups, cooperatives, community networks and social movements. अगर इतना भी नहीं पता है आपको तो you can simply give human social capital is formed through social movements like Me Too or self-help groups like Kudumishri and cooperatives like Lizzat Papad group. Okay, in that way also you can introduce, or you can go with the quote based introduction also. Ki as per Ambedkar, ki I measure the progress of the society by degree of progress that women have achieved. ठीक है कि thus women social capital is important component of empowerment and equity. ठीक है ऐसे भी you can use a quote and link it with the thing. ठीक है then again women social capital as a in advancing empowerment and equity. Now if you see empowerment and equity, ये दोनों concepts as they have used the word and, so ideally we can segregate women empowerment and women equity, but again points would be same. No, so there is a little scope to differentiate between two. So what we will do is we will continue with the single heading human social capital in empowerment and equity. उसमें बस what we will do, we will use the dimensions. So empowerment or equity is developed in social, political, economic, right? Then technological level also you can talk about, or educational. So how political dimension, how equity and empowerment is built through participation and leadership, right? Economic, collective bargaining power और एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप, जैसे लिज्जत पापड़ हो गया, कलेक्टिव बार्गेनिंग थ्रू सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप हो गया, और एक्सेस टू क्रेडिट वो हो गया, ठीक है, और फाइनेंशियल इंडिपेंडेंस ऑल्सो यू कैन टॉक, राइट. देन सोशल डायमेंशन में सोशल सपोर्ट सिस्टम, एग्जाम्पल सखी, वन स्टॉप सॉल्यूशन, और जेंडर इक्विटी, एडवोकेसी, और crisis resilience to mutual support. You can also talk about challenging the patriarchal norms. Okay, you can give the example of any of the women sarpanch, right? That. Then educational dimension, information and awareness, knowledge sharing and literacy. Okay, इसमें बस one thing that you can do, or two things that you can do to bring the X factor into this particular answer is one, कि जो हमने कल बॉक्स वाला अप्रोच यूज किया था फैक्ट फाइल वाला, राइट. सो वन फैक्ट फाइल यू कैन गिव ऑफ छवि राजावत ऑफ राजस्थान. सेकंड, what you could have done is in this particular question you could have used the circular diagram. ठीक है, कैसे कि social capital leading to women empowerment. Basically you have to establish this, right? So this is social capital is formed to self-help group and cooperatives, right? This gives rise to financial independence. This increases political literacy and participation, right? This gives rise to challenging patriarchy, which leads to gender equality, which further promotes this kind of the circular diagram you can highlight. ठीक है, अगेन हमेशा कि सोसाइटी, कल भी मैंने कहा था इन सोसाइटी सोशल जस्टिस क्वेश्चन, राइट? So society also we did that. In social justice also you should have, or you could draw this kind of the circular or virtuous cycle diagram. Then again challenges में वही कि patriarchal norms, political. So again political, economic, social and educational aspect में. So political में political tokenism, example सरपंच पति, right? Economic में resource constraint, lack of access to the credit or lack of asset ownership. कि जैसे women have ownership of only 13% of the land. ठीक है, 13% of the land ownership is with women. ठीक है, that was one important fact. Then social perspective में elite capture or urban bias, women activism is limited to the elite capture or the urban bias. And then patriarchal norms. ये हो गए आपके issues. And then you provide the way forward. Capacity building, federation into groups. In conclusion, you can link it with the SDG. But SDG 5. ठीक है. Then second question of social justice. Inequality in the ownership pattern of resources is one of the major causes of poverty. Discuss in context of paradox of poverty. ठीक है, again कि basically what UPSC is doing is they are linking the poverty with some other theme. ठीक है, कि how environmental or how poverty is related to the environmental degradation, right? Or yesterday we saw the question on the urban poverty, right? Here what they have done is they have linked poverty with inequality, right? So poverty and inequality. ठीक है. Now here again it was a core concept based question, paradox of poverty, right? So basically paradox of poverty is basically the while we are growing, okay, so along with the growth there is the persistence of poverty, right? So that is basically the paradox of poverty, which is best explained through the inequality, right? Ki poverty and growth both are going side by side. Okay, so that paradox itself you have to explain it into the introduction. So paradox of poverty refer to the situation where poverty persists despite growth and abundance of resources, right? तो उसका या फिर what you can do is कि as data based, recently India emerged as the fourth largest economy, right? Recently India became the fourth largest economy. However, as per Oxfam, 1% of the or top 1% hold 40% of the national wealth or 23% of the national income. That is the Oxfam report, no? So that this highlights the paradox of poverty. That can be your introduction, right? So 1% control more than 40% of the wealth. Again, 1% hold 23% of the national income. ठीक है, this is also the one which you can give. Then how inequality in ownership and resources leads to poverty. So what basically you have to do is you have to link the different aspects of the inequality. So what are the different aspects of the inequality? Yes, wealth inequality, land ownership inequality, gender inequality, right? Rural urban inequality. No, so these are the different aspects of the inequality. You simply have to link it with the poverty, right? Or educational inequality, health inequality, nutritional inequality, right? Basically, you have to just establish the relationship between inequality and poverty. Now, in simple, land ownership, pehla, with respect to inequality. So, large farmers and landowners control fertile land, and landless are dependent upon low wages and labor. Right. इसमें you can give the data also. 86% of farmers are small and marginal. Yes, this is modern feudalism. So, see, at present, there is a concept. I'm not able to recall the exact name of the scholar, but they have given the concept of the new medievalism. So, basically, we are moving towards new medievalism in every sphere. So, if you say in the economic sphere also, okay, because of the inequality, basically, the relationship is moving towards noble and serf only. In polity also, if you see in medieval times, there was a constant struggle between the different centers of power. Okay, there was church, there was the kings, and between the kings also there was continuous struggle, and there were the nobles. Even at present, the power, political power has been fragmented. There is rise of the religious fundamentalism. That is the one. Second, rise of the corporate class. They themselves wield a lot of power. Trump is the example of it. And third, your traditional political leaders, right? So in field of politics also we are moving towards that. In field of society also, the increased mob lynching, increased nationalism or the territorial nationalism, increased violence against minorities, that is also showing the hierarchical social structure. So basically we are moving towards the new medievalism. Okay. Okay, so 86% small and marginal farmers, they depend upon subsistence agriculture, right? Then wealth inequality. So top 1% hold 40% natural wealth. Then poor excluded from upward mobility, right? Then access to capital. Formal credit technology markets are towards wealthy individuals. Okay. Poor depend on money lenders and remain trapped in debt. Example, farmer suicides लिख दो. ठीक है. Then educational divide. ठीक है. So example specifically the digital educational divide during the COVID. That example you can give. ठीक है. So because of that, poor are trapped in low skill, low income jobs. Then gender inequality, or so women are only 13% of the land holdings. So lack economic security leads to intergenerational poverty. ठीक है. Then caste inequalities. उसमें भी example you can give कि 96% of the manual scavengers are Dalit. Right? That you can give. Then knowledge or the digital inequality. Right? वैसे. So different aspects of the inequality, you just have to link how it perpetuates poverty. Right? And यहाँ पे भी, as you have to establish the interlinking, simple thing you will do is draw the डायग्राम जो अपने आया है. अगर ज्यादा कुछ नहीं आए, ठीक है, एटलीस्ट एस्टेब्लिश इनइक्वालिटी, पॉवर्टी, इनइक्वालिटी लीडिंग टू पॉवर्टी, पॉवर्टी लीडिंग टू इनइक्वालिटी. एटलीस्ट इतना करो. ठीक है. इफ दिस इज ऑल्सो सेल्फ एक्सप्लेनेटरी. ठीक है. जब आप हेडिंग देते हो, हेडिंग के बाजू में ही बॉक्स करके एटलीस्ट राइट दिस मच. ठीक है. दिस विल ऑल्सो हैव द पॉजिटिव इम्पैक्ट. ठीक है. सो या फिर इफ यू वांट टू गो इन डिटेल, इनइक्वालिटी Then ownership gap. This creates accessibility gap, which leads to intergenerational poverty. This further perpetuates inequality. Right? Inequality creates ownership gap. Because of the ownership gap, there is accessibility gap. Accessibility gap leads to intergenerational poverty. Intergenerational poverty leads to inequality. In that, you can also give the examples of child labor also. ठीक है? But then, now if you read the question carefully, many of the students have missed this aspect. Ki inequality in the ownership pattern is one of the major causes. They are saying one of the major causes of poverty. That means you have to highlight the other causes of poverty also briefly. This many of the aspirants have missed. Okay, so this was the major gap. Okay. So these are your other factors causing poverty. Other factors आपके वही है. Unemployment, low productivity in agriculture, rapid population growth leading to the pressure on the resources, inflation and rising cost of living, social inequalities, poor access, health burdens, climate change वगैरह. ठीक है. Then you briefly explain paradox of poverty. Paradox of poverty क्या क्या है? Growth with poverty. ठीक है. Then food surplus versus malnutrition. Then urban prosperity versus slums. कि urban contributes 60% of GDP but 65 million live in urban slums. और कल भी हमने वो डेटा लिखा था कि around 17% of the urban population lives in slums. ठीक है. That. या फिर ये लिख सकते हैं इंडिया वर्सेस भारत. That is also the one debate, right? Then way forward again urban. ये तो poverty वाले में हमने common way forward दिए थे. One is the urban मनरेगा, that is for the employment generation. Second for skill development, industry 4.0. ठीक है. Third is with respect to social security, scaling up अटल पेंशन योजना या फिर formalization of economy. Fourth, we talked about conditional cash transfers on the lines of Brazil's Bolsa Familia, right? Why? Then education and skills, financial access. And again, conclusion, you can link it with the Amartya Sen capability approach या फिर Article 39B and C. Inequality के हर question में you have to mention Article 39B and C because inequality is concentration of wealth and 39B and C calls for redistributive justice by eliminating concentration of wealth. तो inequality के हर question में you need to have 39B and C. ठीक है? Okay. Now the questions on the IR. IR के question में I don't think there is any X factor as such. ठीक है? Mostly they are static only. So even if you go through the model answer, you'll find simple. The framework that you need to remember for the IR is 2 to 3 things that we suggested is one is the view of the scholars. ठीक है? Mostly either in introduction or conclusion. ठीक है? Second is we had given one framework to generate the points. ठीक है? कि one इसमें geopolitical geo-economic, defense and security, connectivity, and multilateralism. Okay, so this was our framework, and then we had given few of the keywords. Those I have incorporated in model answer itself. But this framework basically was not much applicable in the questions because they have asked the questions on the niche topics rather than asking on the overall India-Africa relations. What they have asked is the India-Africa डिजिटल पार्टनरशिप. ठीक है, तो इसमें आप तो जियो स्ट्रेटेजिक वगैरह तो नहीं ला पाओगे मैक्सिमम. एंड दिस पर्टिकुलर स्टेटमेंट वाज टेकन डायरेक्टली फ्रॉम द एडिटोरियल ऑफ द हिंदू. ठीक है, सो उसमें भी अगर आप कर देते हैं, because I was expecting a question on the Africa, but specifically on digital partnership I wasn't. We asked on the overall India-Africa relationship. उसमें one aspect was the digital relationship. ठीक है, तो इसमें भी again that's why when we talk about scholar, your introduction will be the code based. ठीक है, then digital partnership based upon what they are saying, mutual respect, co-development, long-term institutional partnership. So mutual respect मतलब demand driven, affordable, inclusive, south-south solidarity. ठीक है, co-development मतलब joint innovation, collaboration on the key projects. No, then technology transfer, right? Long-term partnerships मतलब की partnership between IITs and their corresponding institutions from the Africa.
So, China का तो जो है.
Yes, you can link it with that. Basically, I have tried to provide the comparative assessment also. ठीक है, कि this technology transfer without exploitation, unlike Chinese digital silk roads, India provides. I have given few of these such points also. And this is with respect to West, unlike conditional Western aid. ठीक है, तो चाइना वेस्टर्न दोनों मैंने मेंशन किया है ऑलरेडी. देन challenges, way forward. ठीक है, ऐसे. This was also predictable कि when with the waning of globalization, again the same introduction that we gave used yesterday. Means the trend of deglobalization, decline of the globalization. Waning means कि America first, आत्मनिर्भर भारत, ठीक है, China's weaponization of the supply chains, EU's focus on strategic autonomy, right? Those are, or the Trump's tariff and reciprocal tariffs by the countries, rising protectionism, then the decline of the WTO, multilateralism, okay, dysfunctional United Nations, okay, rising territorial nationalism and rising national wars, जैसे Ukraine, Russia wars वगैरह हो गया. These are all the trend of the deglobalization, which is waning of globalization, right? Here also again ग्लोबलाइजेशन पे क्वेश्चन है, तो जो कल हमने इंट्रोडक्शन दिया था सेम इंट्रोडक्शन वी आर गिविंग. यस्टरडे इटसेल्फ वी यूज्ड नो दिस. हाउएवर एट प्रेजेंट वर्ल्ड इज विटनेसिंग डिग्लोबलाइजेशन. इतना ही हमने ऐड किया है, अदरवाइज खराब हो गया. सो एक्सेप्ट फॉर दिस पार्ट, ठीक है, ये तो कल की है. दैट इज व्हाई द माइक्रो थीम्स आर इंपॉर्टेंट, राइट? ग्लोबलाइजेशन इज द इंपॉर्टेंट माइक्रो थीम. सो इफ यू हैड प्रिपेयर्ड the introduction of the globalization beforehand, okay, you could have used or you can use that across the papers. For example, in society questions also yesterday we used the same introduction of definition. In IR question also, it is also on globalization. We are using the same introduction. This will save your time, right? So preparing micro theme wise, okay, will give you at least head start with respect to introductions, with respect to conclusions, or with respect to at least 50% of your points. Okay. Secondly, it will ensure the precision and richness in your content, right? अगर आप इसी पर्टिकुलर क्वेश्चन में ऑन द स्पॉट अगर आप इंट्रोडक्शन क्वेश्चन तैयार करने जाओ, ठीक है, दैट पर्टिकुलर इंट्रोडक्शन वोंट हैव दैट दिस लेवल ऑफ द precision and sophistication, right? That is why pick your micro theme, prepare one or two introductions. This is globalization, this is one definition. ठीक है, you prepare one quote, ठीक है, दो में से कोई भी यूज करो, ठीक है. Then this is waning of globalization, economic shocks, conflict, backlash to inequality, technological decoupling. Then this has led to rise of sovereign nationalism, economic nationalism, political nationalism, strategic assertion, digital nationalism, security nationalism, vaccine nationalism, right? So different aspects of the nationalism, its implications, erosion of multilateralism, shift from globalization to regionalism, risk of conflict and protectionist blocks.
De-dollarization.
De-dollarization also you can give. ठीक है, ये इसमें आएगा waning of globalization में you can put de-dollarization effects of the. और यहाँ पे you can put one quote also of Farid Zakaria की rise of post-American world order and decline of the West and rise of the rest. Okay. Then again, globalization was basically based upon the principle of primacy of geoeconomics over geopolitics. Right, globalization was majorly an economic phenomenon, right? But present, as globalization is on decline, so geopolitics has again taken the primacy over geoeconomics. So geopolitics is the crux, or the geopolitics is the prime assumption of the realist school of thought in international politics. So realist school of thought consider international relations as the struggle for power, right? So as we are witnessing deglobalization, so that has reflects the return to the realist state-centric policies. No? And then following the policy of multi-alignment, we are basically giving way forward based upon enlightened self-interest, issue-based partnerships. Okay, these words are given by the S. Shankar. If you want, you can mention it into the bracket also. ये keywords बस याद रखो, that's it. Then energy security, again West Asia also I was expecting the question. So energy, you can start with the data, then briefly highlighted challenges in the energy security, and then integrating energy security with foreign policy, key trajectories, okay, diversification, institutionalization, then strategic petroleum reserves, maritime security at the choke points, energy transition. It's not just about oil and gas, but renewable energy also. Okay. Technology cooperation, regional corridors, India Middle East economic corridor. No? Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah, and then yes, we have mentioned Chabar Port, regional corridors. Okay. Then conclusion with the quote. Then this also, basically we have to highlight the UN also. We suggested this is not Winston Churchill. ये गलत है. This is Doug Hammarskjöld, the former Secretary General of the UN. So again, you give the quote and link it, just rephrase the question. Then basically what reforms. So different aspects of the reform: Security Council, working methods, UN General Assembly reforms, peacekeeping reforms. Then confrontation. कि issue, Western position, Russia-China position on different aspects. You just highlight the confrontation between those two. And then major reasons. Then way forward you give and conclusions. As per PM Modi, UN is facing crisis of confidence. ठीक है? And reformed multilateralism with the reformed UN at its core, the aspirations of the humanity. तो ये उनका quote था, you can use the same quote. So IR questions were comparatively static. ठीक है? All it required was the use of the keywords and the examples.
The static or what was the data will be used of current method.
हाँ, तो डेटा अगर आप अक्रॉस दी इसमें देखोगे गवर्नेंस सोसाइटी या सोशल जस्टिस, जो डेटा हमने कल यूज किया था, मैक्सिमम द सिमिलर डेटा वी आर यूजिंग टुडे आल्सो, राइट? सो दैट इज द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग इज कि यू जस्ट पिक योर माइक्रो थीम, कि जैसे पॉवर्टी या ग्लोबलाइजेशन हो गया, तो यस्टरडे आल्सो वी पिक दैट ग्लोबलाइजेशन क्वेश्चन, द सेम कंटेंट वी आर यूजिंग हियर. So rather than going subject wise, you prepare the micro theme, compile the data related to it. जैसे poverty का question हमने कल भी किया था. We use some data of the World Bank with respect to urban poverty. ठीक है? Similar data we are using here also. Right? Same Niti Aayog data we have used. Inequality we used yesterday also. So micro theme wise you compile your data. That can be used across the paper. Second only thing that you require is the interlinking between the concepts. So if you know the components, जैसे कल भी we talked about the different components, यहाँ पे भी अगर देखोगे तो पॉवर्टी के components हमने देखे थे, then women empowerment equity के components, political, economic, social, educational, ठीक है? Similarly और भी questions के we just went for the components, right? So on the basis of that you can easily generate the points.
सोसाइटी का डेटा पब्लिक एक्सेस में यूज कर सकते हैं
As long as it is relevant. So see, question are don't go subject specific, ठीक है? Go theme specific. जैसे कल उन्होंने GS1 में दे asked on the civil society, sorry civil services, वो कहाँ से सोसाइटी से रिलेटेड है? That is basically if you go subject wise, that is of the governance. So don't segregate as per subjects, segregate as per themes, micro themes. तो वो subject specific classification का जमाना गया, ठीक है? You have to go with the micro themes. Okay, if poverty is your micro theme, you have to prepare the points as per poverty. फिर बाकी वो आपके किसी के भी आ जाए, GS1 में they can ask, GS2 में they can ask, GS3 में they can ask. So last year one interesting thing was there कि they asked the question on the NGO and civil society in GS1, 2, 3, all the three papers. Okay, you pick up the papers of 2024, you see the questions. तीनों में थे, उसको कौन से सब्जेक्ट में डालोगे? ठीक है? So it doesn't matter which subject that particular topic is, you just focus upon the micro themes. ठीक है? Okay. So day after tomorrow we'll be having, tomorrow we'll be having session on this GS3.